Yeah, I guess on the topic of emotional regulation, that one, I also wonder about that in terms of how that is shaped in a child. But I guess naturally for kids who have ADHD, is their ability to regulate their emotions typically, is that already, is not the right set of words, but is it off already to begin with, or is that something that kind of develops over time?
Think I would say that it's generally part of ADHD, and but it's not. It's more like it takes longer for those skills to develop. So
Mm,
kids can be, I guess the way to explain it is that they might have some delays in that area. So emotional regulation is really the ability to be able to moderate or change our emotions, handle them. So when there are big emotions like anger, frustration, that kind of thing, to be able to do whatever we need to do to have those feelings then kind of come down to a manageable level again.
right.
And so when kids have delays with that or difficulties, if it's related to ADHD or other things, because lots of kids come for support with managing emotions, it can look like having really big reactions to smaller kind of stimulus or situations, or maybe reactions that then stay heightened for a really long time and kids have trouble getting back down to calm place. Or maybe they're just triggered off a lot, like lots throughout the day, they're becoming really upset. So yeah, it's a little bit, it's complex, it's difficult, but that's where a really big role for parents comes in, I think, because when kids are small, they have these big reactions where usually they're doing things naturally that helps them handle the emotions. Like maybe you talk to your kids about it and you name the feelings for them and tell them what's happening, and you tell them they'll be okay. You offer comfort, whether it's closeness or a cuddle or just a sympathetic look. And so all of those things are where we're co-regulating. So we're kind of helping our kids regulate their emotions because they're not yet independent in doing it. And that's how they practice and learn and then eventually become independent in that. And the same's true for ADHD kids. It will just take a little bit longer potentially.
Yeah, I definitely, we noticed that with our oldest, like, she's pretty good at naming her feelings, but definitely there are moments where you kind of wonder why she might be reacting the way she is. And then sometimes you try to use those tactics that you just talked about, right? Like just try to be as empathetic as possible, try to sit with her in those feelings. And then sometimes she'll calm down and sometimes she won't. And it can be challenging. I sometimes wonder, like, the inconsistency, like, often, like, my daughter won't necessarily just yell out in a grocery store or in the middle, but sometimes it just happens and you're just caught off guard entirely.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to deal with those kind of situations. And you can't ignore your child because that shows that you're not responding to their needs. But at the same time, like, you're feeling this sense of pressure maybe on yourself to react to that. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes it can be tough to support your kid through regulating their emotions, I guess.
Yeah, it can be for sure. I thought two things when you were talking there. And one, as you're describing kind of your daughter sometimes calming and sometimes not. I feel like my husband would say the same about me. So sometimes as adults, we have to kind of know too that kids won't be perfect at it. And
Yeah.
that it's because we're not either. We're all
No.
humans at the end of the
Yeah.
day. And some days, some days it's harder because it's just a bad day or it's a hard day for whatever reason. Maybe, you've had not as much sleep as usual and, something didn't go right with your friends. And so that means it's going to be a harder day in general to do that. But yeah, the other thing that I don't know if you ever saw it, I saw this photo that even went as viral as reaching us over here in Australia of that American actor and director Justin Baldoni standing
Okay.
with one of his kids was having a tantrum at his feet in a shopping center or something, and he was just standing there calmly talking to his father in the moment because he was talking about that ability to know that it's not a reflection of him as a parent and that a child was going through something. He was just going to wait it out. And I just, it's so different to the experience I have, which is just sheer stress and panic in those times of thinking everyone's looking at me and judging me. And yeah. It
And
is incredibly difficult.
you'll still see it from different generations. Like I find that with parents of today, if your kid is kind of having a bit of an outburst, they kind of get it, and there's a little bit
Hmm.
more of like, no, let's just give them their space. They're good. They'll handle it. And then
Yeah.
sometimes you still see those older generations be like, you got to go take care of your kid. What are you doing there, right? So,
Yeah. Yep.
so there's
Mm.
one of the things I find is helpful with my daughter when if we especially if we're trying to understand sort of how her day has went. One of the strategies that we've have found it being effective is to not ask her right after school how her day went,
Mhm.
because we noticed that she could be just processing how the day went. She could be full of emotions. If something had just happened too, she's not really ready to talk about it. And that is true for adults too. I don't know about you, but like when I come home from work, yeah, I'm in dad mode, but at the same time, I kind of don't really want to talk about my day. I kind of just want to settle in and at least need it like 5 or 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
To settle in, and then I'm kind of maybe more ready to talk about things. So I imagine the same thing is true for kids. And then we find with like, later on, hour or two, you'd start talking about her day, and she naturally just opens up a little bit more.
Yeah. I think so because I think drawing the analogy to how you feel after work is a good one because school and learning and play really is a child's occupation. And so they've been doing a lot of stuff, processing a lot of stuff, learning a lot of stuff, and sometimes they just need that time to transition from doing that into being at home and playing and processing everything that's happened. They're probably tired, they might be hungry.
As a psychologist, when patients come to you or clients come to you about how to support their kids through emotional regulation, you kind of talked about some of that. But in terms of supporting the kid and helping them through regulating their emotions, what's usually the approach that you take?
I usually about talking about the size of feelings, firstly explaining what or talking about what different feelings are and
Mm-hmm.
the different feelings that we have in different situations, but also talking about them in terms of a size as well. So we might feel angry some days and it's a 1 out of 10. We might feel angry that's a 9 out of 10 other times. And so talking about how I usually talk about how big things are hard to hold. I
Mm-hmm.
sometimes do it practically with giving kids, a couple of fit balls and asking them if they can help me carry them down to my office. And they're like, no, it's too big to hold. And like, oh, so that's like the really big feelings. It's too hard to hold.
Mm-hmm.
But if you make it smaller, then it's easier to handle and to carry. And so that's where then the
I like that.
strategies come in. Yeah, I think kids are really concrete and practical and visual. And so then I guess they need to understand the concept of why would I calm down? And then once they do, you can teach them some of the strategies about how. So common ones are things like deep breathing, sometimes which I will teach kids, I guess, in a few different ways. There are lots of fun videos on YouTube about different kind of slow breathing for kids, maybe like breathing in like you're smelling a flower and breathing out like you're trying to make a candle flicker but not blow out.
Mm-hmm.
Or we do a lot of blowing bubbles as well because you have to do that really slow breath in, but then a long breath out with that kind of particular shaped mouth when you're trying to blow bubbles or through a straw really helps
Right.
them get the concept of it. That's for young kids, I guess. And then when you're talking about it with older kids too, sometimes you bring in how thinking plays a part as well, because some
Mm-hmm.
days where our emotions are different depending on the situation, and or in the same situation you have a different feeling to the person next to you. And why is that? It's because it's how you're thinking about it. So trying to shift some of those maybe patterns of thinking kids have or beliefs that they have that contributes to why they're getting so upset about things. Yeah.
Yeah, those are great. Those are thank you for sharing those. Well, as you were talking, one of the things that was coming to mind is we've been talking a lot about emotional regulation, but maybe you can kind of differentiate this a little bit because emotions are also just a natural part of us as humans, right? Like we want to
Yeah.
honor our emotions, and for so long, like there's been a stigma of we need to bury those emotions, right? And we need
Mm-hmm.
to not honor those and not recognize them. That's not what we're saying when we're talking about emotional regulation, right?
No, that's right. Yeah. I think one of the questions you had sent through was really great, because you when we were chatting about this discussion, should we be embracing our emotions? And yeah, we definitely should. They're part of life, and the ups and the downs, I think. And it's definitely not about pushing them down. It's more just about having a way that we can handle our emotions so that they are not in control of us. We're kind of, I wouldn't say we're in control of our emotions, but yeah, you don't want to kind of have them be guiding everything you do. So every choice that you're making is coming from a really emotional place, because it's not a nice place to live, to be like that. So it's just about, sorry, what was your question?
No, I was just going to say, so I could understand that with emotions that maybe we generally categorize as perhaps more negative. But if they're positive emotions, why wouldn't we want
Mm.
to be consumed by them? Why would we want to regulate those?
Yeah, well, I guess mostly you could. You could. Sometimes for the kids I work with, who, particularly ADHD kids, if they're happy and excited, or even autistic kids as well, it can be really difficult to handle. And
Mm,
I think most of the time it's just about being potentially choosing where we let them go and where we don't. So if you're really excited in class, you kind of have to be able to maybe handle it a little bit so that you're not bouncing out of your seat and running around
hmm
in the classroom.
hmm
But it's fine at home to do that. So,
Yeah, so yeah, I know I'm kind of struggling with this one. I know what we're trying to say, but I feel like it's not like I can kind of see the distinction, but we're not trying to say don't embrace your emotions, but yet there's a kind of a time and place, or it could be, or by not having some sort of regulation, it may not allow you to achieve the outcome that you're maybe hoping to have, or something of that
mm,
effect. But I think that there's still a bit of a, when people feel overly emotional, there's this sense of not necessarily always honoring those emotions. Because philosophically, I think I've heard that emotions are kind of a reflection of your true being, like your true
mm.
self, your soul, like from a philosophical standpoint. Like, so if you, it just from that point, it's like, you're not fully honoring yourself, right, to some degree as well.
Yeah, that is true. Maybe it's more about how they're expressed, and I guess it is easier to think about it in terms of the emotions we might see more negatively, like anger and frustration. And I guess the difference might be that expressing it through saying "I am angry," even if it's yelling, is probably better than throwing things or hitting people and
Yeah.
punching stuff. But it does still need to be honored. I think it's part of the human experience. It's what makes us who we are, and our
And
lives
to
what they are.
and to some degree, like, I mean, kids are not to some degree, I think this is fairly true. I would is kids are some of the most are the most present beings, right? Like
Yes.
they're so mindful, they're so in their moment, and it's usually us as parents who are pulling them along to, practice or whatever the next appointment is, and
Hmm.
taking them away from just being and feeling those emotions. And
Yeah.
then we kind of wonder when they're adults and they're struggling to find themselves, right,
Yeah.
because we kind of strip that away to some degree, right? So there's like this kind of careful balance, it feels like, of when to allow them to kind of embrace emotions, but you kind of also need them to understand that maybe that feeling of, and like I think these negative emotions are easier to kind of talk about perhaps, but like that feeling of anger, you want to embrace that, but that over anger can also have consequences too, or may not be
Mm.
productive, in helping them understand that. But I think there's this, I don't know, maybe there's a fine balance. I could be wrong, but
No, I mean, you are reflecting to what we, I guess, professionals, so in terms of child psychology, or whether it's education as well, seem to observe that we are trying to put more things on kids than they're perhaps at the developmental level for. And so if kids didn't need to be sitting in school for the rest of the day, they wouldn't have such pressure to regulate their emotions to this degree. They would be able to, just follow the happiness, and if they were angry, just deal with it, and it wouldn't be such a problem. It's just because they were expecting them to be in school, and
mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. So there are definitely elements, I think, of what would be great for kids in their development that just doesn't quite fit with our modern day life, and maybe
Right.
that's where some of the struggle comes from.
Yeah, and the societal construct that we have, right?
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.